Thanksgiving was supposed to be about gratitude, but in my family, it was always a performance review. This year, I discovered my place card labeled, "The Other Son," while my brother got our pride. Dad raised his crystal glass, grinning at everyone except me. "Some kids just peak early," he announced, handing my brother Jackson a Rolex, while sliding me a self-help book called Mediocrity to Mastery. I smiled politely, knowing something he didn't. Before I continue this story, I would love to know where you are watching from. Drop your location in the comments, and subscribe if family drama hits close to home. Growing up as Thomas and Diana Montgomery's firstborn should have been a privilege. For the first 4 years of my life, it was. I have faded memories of my father teaching me to throw a baseball in our backyard, proudly displaying my finger paintings on his office door and carrying me on his shoulders at the county fair. Those memories feel like they belong to someone else now, someone who disappeared when Jackson arrived. I was almost 5 when my brother was born. Even at that age, I noticed the shift in my father's attention. Jackson was the spitting image of our father, with his bright blue eyes and charismatic smile, while I inherited my mother's more understated features and reserved personality. Dad would spend hours playing with Jackson, coaching his Little League games, and bragging about his natural athletic ability to anyone who would listen. My mother, a kind but conflict-averse woman, noticed the disparity in treatment, but chose peace over confrontation. "Your father just connects with Jackson differently," she would explain after Dad skipped my science fair to attend Jackson's baseball game. "He loves you both the same." But actions speak louder than words, and his actions told a different story. By middle school, the pattern was firmly established. When I brought home straight A's, Dad would nod and say, "That is what we expect from you." When Jackson managed a B- average, Dad threw a celebration dinner and bought him a new gaming system for working so hard to improve. The message was clear: my achievements were ordinary, while Jackson's mediocrity was extraordinary. High school continued the trend. I joined debate team and won state championships. Dad attended one competition in 4 years. Jackson became quarterback of the football team, despite being third string most of the season, and Dad never missed a game. When I was accepted to University of Michigan with a partial academic scholarship, Dad said, "At least that will save us some money." When Jackson got accepted to Dad's alma mater, Stanford, with his lackluster grades and standardized test scores, Dad threw a party and bought him a car. I worked 2 part-time jobs throughout college to minimize student loans, while maintaining a 3.9 gigapascals in business administration with a focus on emerging technologies. Meanwhile, Jackson changed majors 3 times, took 6 years to graduate with a general communications degree, and called home whenever he needed extra money, which was often. At my graduation, which my parents attended only because it fell on the same weekend as a business conference my father had in the area, Dad barely acknowledged my summa cum laude honors. "Now comes the hard part," he said. "Finding a job where you can actually apply all that book knowledge." At Jackson's graduation a year later, he beamed with pride and gave a toast at the celebration dinner about how his son was destined for greatness. I secured a position with a respected consulting firm without any family connections. I strategically chose a company that specialized in digital transformation for traditional businesses, recognizing that this intersection of technology and established industries represented the future. For 3 years, I learned everything I could, worked longer hours than anyone else, and built relationships with clients based on delivering consistent results. Jackson, meanwhile, cycled through 3 jobs in 2 years, each one secured through Dad's golf buddies. He was always just about to break through in his career, according to our father, despite being let go for poor performance more than once. During my 4th year at the consulting firm, I identified a significant gap in the market. Many mid-sized businesses needed specialized technology implementation services, but couldn't afford the major consulting firms. The large consultancies wanted million-dollar contracts, leaving companies with revenues under $50 million underserved. I started my own firm, Montgomery Digital Solutions, moonlighting with a single client while maintaining my day job. I reinvested every penny of profit back into the business, carefully building my client base through referrals and results. Within 18 months, I had enough steady business to leave my job and focus on my company full-time. For the next 5 years, I meticulously grew the business without fanfare or family knowledge. I deliberately kept my success private, tired of having my achievements diminished. My father assumed I was still plugging away at my corporate job, and I never corrected him. In family gatherings, I deflected questions about work with vague responses about staying busy while Dad monopolized conversations with Jackson's latest almost breakthrough. Now, at 32, I employ 75 people and service clients across 17 states. Last month, we secured a contract with a nationally recognized retail chain to overhaul their entire digital infrastructure, a deal worth $8 million. Business journals have begun featuring our company as an example of sustainable growth and employee satisfaction. I built a culture that rewards merit, hard work, and integrity, values I found lacking in my own upbringing. Not that my family would know any of this. At every holiday gathering, including last Thanksgiving, I remained the other son, the one who had somehow failed to live up to unspoken expectations, despite all evidence to the contrary. November had always been difficult for me. As the holiday season approached, the familiar dread of family gatherings would settle in my stomach like a stone. This Thanksgiving promised to be no different. 3 weeks before the holiday, my mother called. "Noel, you are coming this year, aren't you? Your father would be so disappointed if you weren't there." The irony of her statement wasn't lost on me. Dad would be disappointed by my absence, but never by my presence. "I have a lot going on with work, Mom," I said, which was true. We were implementing the first phase of the retail chain contract. Jackson will be there with his new girlfriend. He just got a promotion, you know. Vice President of Client Relations. Her voice carried that familiar note of implicit comparison. What she didn't know was that Jackson's promotion was at a struggling marketing agency that had lost 3 major clients in the past year. My company had actually been approached by one of those former clients. "I will try," I finally conceded, knowing that refusing would only result in weeks of guilt-inducing texts from my mother. The morning of Thanksgiving, I prepared myself mentally as I dressed in a tailored suit that cost more than the monthly lease on my father's BMW, not that he would notice or care. I arrived at my parents' suburban colonial precisely at 3 o'clock. Carrying a bottle of wine that cost more than what most people spend on their entire Thanksgiving meal. My Aunt Patricia answered the door with genuine warmth. "Noel, so wonderful to see you. You look fantastic." She lowered her voice. "How is that business of yours going?" "Still consulting." My aunt was the only family member who had ever bothered to ask specific questions about my work, though even she didn't know the full scope of my success. "It is going well, thank you." "Staying busy," I replied with my standard deflection. The house was filled with the usual Thanksgiving chaos. Cousins chasing each other through the living room, uncles arguing about politics in the den, and the women clustered in the kitchen pretending to help my mother while drinking wine and gossiping. My father stood in the center of it all, holding court with Jackson beside him, both wearing matching cashmere sweaters. Jackson spotted me first. "Bro, you made it." He bounded over with his typical exuberance, pulling along a stunning woman with impossibly perfect hair. "This is Sophia. She is a model. Well, an aspiring model. She has done 3 commercials already." I shook her hand politely. "Nice to meet you, Sophia. I am Noel Jackson's brother." "The smart one," she said with unexpected insight. "Jackson has told me all about you." Before I could respond, my father approached. "Noel," he acknowledged with a perfunctory handshake. No hug, no warm greeting. "Glad you could fit us into your schedule." "I wouldn't miss Thanksgiving, Dad," I replied evenly. His eyes flicked dismissively over my attire. "Business must be steady enough if you can afford new clothes," he remarked clearly, assuming I was still at my old corporate job. Nothing like Jackson's new position, though. Vice President at 30. Impressive, isn't it? I smiled non-committally. "Congratulations, Jackson." "Thanks, bro," Jackson beamed, either oblivious to or unconcerned by our father's comparison. "Dad says next stop is the C-suite. Chief Marketing Officer within 2 years. My father clapped Jackson on the shoulder. "No doubt about it. He has the Montgomery charm. Gets things done through relationships, not just burying his head in spreadsheets. The dig was obvious. When dinner was announced, we moved to the formal dining room where my mother had outdone herself with decorations. The table was resplendent with autumn-colored linens, polished silver, and elegant place cards at each setting. I found mine next to Cousin Eddie, the family black sheep who had been arrested twice for drunk driving. My card simply read "The Other Son." I stared at it, wondering if this was some kind of joke. Across the table, Jackson's place card read, "Our Pride." I glanced around and saw my parents' cards labeled Head of Family and Gracious Hostess, respectively. No one else seemed to notice or care about this small but pointed cruelty. I took my seat without comment as dishes were passed and wine was poured. Throughout dinner, my father directed most of the conversation toward Jackson's accomplishments, real and exaggerated. Jackson just landed the Westridge account, he announced proudly. $10 million in potential billing. What Dad didn't know, and what Jackson probably hadn't told him, was that Westridge had been shopping for new representation for months and was unlikely to spend even a quarter of that amount. "What about you, Noel?" my Uncle Jim asked momentarily, shifting attention my way. Still at that tech place, before I could answer, my father interjected. "Noel is very dedicated to his job. Isn't that right? 7 years now at the same desk?" He chuckled as if this consistency was something to pity rather than respect. Actually, I began, then stopped myself. What was the point? No correction of facts would change his perception. "Yes, very dedicated," I finished. As the meal progressed, I noticed my cousin Ella watching this dynamic with increasing discomfort. She had always been perceptive, and the favoritism was particularly blatant today. After the pumpkin pie was served, my father stood and tapped his crystal glass with a silver spoon. The table fell silent as everyone turned expectantly toward him. "I want to thank everyone for joining us on this special Thanksgiving," he began. "Family is everything to Diana and me. And speaking of family, I have some special acknowledgments to make." He reached under his chair and produced 2 wrapped packages. Each year I like to recognize milestones. And this year we have much to celebrate with Jackson's extraordinary rise in his career. Some kids just peak early, while others. His eyes flickered briefly toward me. "Well, some just take longer to find their way." The room grew uncomfortably quiet. My mother stared fixedly at her plate. Aunt Patricia pressed her lips into a thin line of disapproval. "Jackson, my father continued your drive, and natural talent have made your mother and me so proud. This is to celebrate your accomplishments, and the many more to come." He handed Jackson a small box wrapped in gold paper. Jackson tore it open with childish enthusiasm, revealing a gleaming Rolex watch with our family crest engraved on the back. "This was my father's watch," Dad explained, his voice thick with emotion, "and his father's before him. It represents our family legacy of excellence and achievement." Jackson slipped it onto his wrist immediately. "Wow, Dad, this is incredible. I promise to live up to everything it stands for." My father nodded approvingly before turning to me. "And Noel, we haven't forgotten you." He handed me a package wrapped in plain brown paper. I opened it carefully to reveal a book titled Mediocrity to Mastery: Finding Your Path to Success After a Slow Start. "I saw this and thought of you immediately," my father said, with what he probably thought was encouragement. "It is never too late to make something of yourself." The author was 40 before he found his purpose. Inside he had inscribed, "To Noel, may this help you find your way." Dad. The table went completely silent. My cousin Ella audibly gasped. Even Jackson looked momentarily embarrassed before the self-satisfaction of his own gift reasserted itself. I could have reacted in countless ways. I could have thrown the book at him, stormed out, or revealed my company's success, putting him in his place once and for all. Instead, I smiled politely, thanked him for his thoughtfulness, and placed the book beside my plate. "You always know exactly what I need, Dad." I said, my voice carefully neutral. I raised my glass in a small toast. "To family." The relief around the table was palpable as conversation hesitantly resumed. Only my aunt noticed that I hadn't actually taken a sip from my glass. The remainder of Thanksgiving dinner passed in a blur of forced conversation and sidelong glances. As soon as it was socially acceptable, I made my excuses, thanked my mother for the meal, and left with my self-help book tucked under my arm. Back in my downtown penthouse, I placed the book on my home office shelf, next to similar gifts from previous years. Finding Confidence in a Competitive World Success Habits of Natural Winners, and my personal favorite, When Good Enough Is Not Enough. My father had quite the collection of backhanded insults disguised as encouragement. I threw myself into work the following week, finalizing the implementation plan for our retail client and interviewing candidates for our expanding cybersecurity division. I was reviewing resumes late Friday afternoon when my HR director, Laura, knocked on my office door. "Noel, do you have a minute? We have an interesting application I thought you might want to see personally." She placed a resume on my desk without further explanation. The name at the top stopped me cold. Thomas Montgomery. "Your father?" I assume Laura asked, though she clearly knew the answer. "He applied for the Senior Business Development Director position. His resume is interesting." I stared at the document, momentarily unable to process what I was seeing. My father had applied to my company. The father who thought I was still working at a cubicle in someone else's business. Did he know it was my company when he applied? I asked. Laura shook her head. "I do not think so. The online application does not mention you specifically, just the executive leadership team. And your last name is common enough." I scanned the resume quickly, noting numerous embellishments and outright fabrications. He claimed to have spearheaded digital transformation initiatives at his company, when in reality he had fought against technological changes at every turn. He listed expertise in strategic client acquisition methodologies that were industry buzzwords without substance. Most telling was the employment history. According to this resume, he was still employed as Executive Vice President at Bradshaw Manufacturing, the company where he had worked for the past 20 years. But industry contacts had informed me months ago that Bradshaw was restructuring and had let go several high-level executives. I had no idea my father might have been among them. "How do you want to handle this?" Laura asked. After a moment's reflection, I replied, "Schedule him for an interview. Tuesday, 2 o'clock. Do not mention my name or position." Are you sure Laura knew enough about my family situation to understand the complexity? Yes. And Laura, let us keep this between us for now. Over the weekend, I did my research. Discreet calls to contacts confirmed that Thomas Montgomery had indeed been let go from Bradshaw Manufacturing nearly 4 months ago during a management restructuring. The company had been losing market share to more technologically advanced competitors, and my father's resistance to digital integration had become a liability. This explained certain inconsistencies in recent family gatherings. My father's usual luxury brand clothing had been replaced with less expensive alternatives. My mother had mentioned they were reconsidering their annual winter trip to Aspen. The pieces fit together now. Tuesday arrived, and I prepared my office for the interview. I removed personal photos and awards that might immediately identify me as the company's founder and CEO. I asked my assistant to show Thomas Montgomery in when he arrived, but to introduce me only as the interviewer until I could make the introduction myself. At precisely 2 o'clock, my father walked through my office door. He looked older than he had at Thanksgiving, the strain of hidden unemployment evident in the new lines around his eyes. He wore his interview suit, the same one he had worn to business functions for the past decade, now slightly shiny at the elbows. "Mr. Montgomery, thank you for coming in today," I said, standing but not immediately extending my hand. "Please have a seat." It took him 3 seconds to register who was sitting behind the desk. His eyes widened, his mouth opened slightly, and color drained from his face. "Noel, what are you doing here?" He looked around, confused. There must be some mistake. "I am here to interview with the CEO of Montgomery Digital Solutions." "No mistake," I replied calmly. "I am the founder and CEO of Montgomery Digital Solutions. We have 75 employees and clients in 17 states. Our annual revenue last year was $22 million. He sank into the chair across from me, stunned into rare silence. "Now," I continued, "I understand you are interested in our Senior Business Development Director position. Let us discuss your qualifications." His shock quickly transformed into what I recognized as his business negotiation face. Well, this is certainly unexpected but fortuitous. Family connection aside, I bring over 30 years of executive experience to the table. Yes, I have reviewed your resume. There are several points I would like to clarify. For the next 45 minutes, I conducted a proper interview, asking pointed questions about his experience, methodologies, and accomplishments. I challenged his claimed expertise in digital transformation, asking for specific examples that he struggled to provide. I questioned the gap in his employment history, giving him the opportunity to explain or correct the misrepresentation. It appears there is a discrepancy, I noted. Your resume indicates you are currently employed at Bradshaw, but our industry sources suggest there was a management restructuring several months ago. His face flushed. A temporary situation. Bradshaw and I are in discussions about a consulting arrangement. I see. And these digital transformation initiatives you claim to have led, the results seem at odds with Bradshaw's recent market performance. With each question, his composure cracked further. The father, who had always positioned himself as the successful businessman, the mentor with wisdom to impart, was now fumbling for answers in front of the son he had underestimated for decades. Finally, he abandoned the pretense. Look, Noel, clearly there has been a misunderstanding between us. I had no idea you had achieved this level of success. Your mother and I always worried about your career path, your lack of ambition. You never talked about promotions or advancement. I never lacked ambition, Dad. I just stopped sharing it with people who could not recognize it. He leaned forward, switching tactics. Well, water under the bridge now. Family helps family. I am sure we can find a suitable executive position for me here. After all, I have decades of experience that could benefit your little company. Montgomery Digital Solutions does not hire based on family connections, I replied. We hire based on merit-demonstrated skills and cultural fit. But I am your father, he protested, as if this fact alone entitled him to special consideration. Yes, you are. And if I were to offer you special treatment because of our relationship, I would be engaging in exactly the kind of favoritism that has defined our family dynamic for as long as I can remember. The silence that followed was profound. For perhaps the first time in his life, Thomas Montgomery was confronted with the consequences of his own behavior, reflected back at him. What happened at Bradshaw? I asked, my tone softening slightly. His shoulders sagged. They said I was resistant to change, that my methods were outdated. After 20 years, they gave me 3 weeks' notice and a modest severance package. He looked up vulnerability briefly, replacing his usual confidence. I have not told your mother or Jackson yet. We have been living on savings, which is running out. I nodded, understanding both his practical dilemma and his pride. We do have an opening in our business development department. Not at the director level, but as a senior account manager. The position would match your verifiable skills and experience, with room for advancement based on performance. A demotion, he asked incredulously. A fresh start, I corrected. With clear metrics for success and a competitive compensation package. The same opportunity we would offer anyone with your actual qualifications. I could see him calculating his limited options, weighing his pride against his dwindling bank account. Finally, he nodded. When would I start? Monday. Laura will provide the details and paperwork. I stood, extending my hand formally. Welcome to Montgomery Digital Solutions, Mr. Montgomery. The following months brought changes I could never have anticipated. My father started his position with a mixture of resentment and determination. His first weeks were rough, as he adjusted to taking direction from managers years younger than himself. His natural charm helped him connect with potential clients, but he struggled with our technology-forward approach and collaborative culture. I maintained professional distance, treating him neither better nor worse than any other employee. He received the same feedback, the same opportunities for growth, and the same consequences for mistakes as everyone else. The truth about both our situations eventually came out to the family. My mother was shocked by my business success and horrified that my father had hidden his job loss. Jackson was initially jealous and defensive, but reality was a powerful teacher. Without our father's constant inflation of his accomplishments, He began to recognize the hollow nature of his supposed success. After 3 months, my father requested a meeting with me, not as an employee but as family. We met at a neutral location, a coffee shop downtown. "I have been doing a lot of thinking," he began awkwardly, "about our family, about how I treated you compared to Jackson." I remained silent, allowing him space to continue. I always saw myself in Jackson. His personality, his way with people. It was easy to connect with him, to understand him. He stared into his coffee. "You were always so different, quieter, more analytical. I did not know how to relate to you, so I stopped trying, and started comparing," I added. He nodded slowly. "Yes. Instead of appreciating your strengths, I measured them against what I understood, what I valued. I was wrong." It wasn't a full apology, but from my father this level of self-reflection was unprecedented. "I have watched how you run your company," he continued. "The culture you have created. The respect you command, not through intimidation, but through genuine leadership." He looked up at me. "You are twice the businessman I ever was." The words I had longed to hear for decades landed with less impact than I had imagined. I did not need his validation anymore, but I appreciated his effort to provide it nonetheless. Over the following months, my father worked hard to prove himself professionally, while making small but meaningful attempts to repair our personal relationship. My mother found her voice confronting the favoritism that had damaged our family for years. Jackson, stripped of his pedestal, began the humbling process of building a career based on actual effort rather than charm and connections. The following Thanksgiving looked very different from the one before. We gathered at my home, a subtle but important shift in family dynamics. My father, now 6 months into his position and recently promoted to team lead based on genuine performance, helped set the table. When he placed the cards at each setting, I noticed each one simply had our names. No labels, no hierarchy, no designations of worth or favor. Just family. As we settled around the table, my father raised his glass. "I would like to propose a toast," he announced, his voice carrying none of the condescension of the previous year. "To second chances and new beginnings. To recognizing value in its many forms. And to my son Noel, who taught me more about success and integrity than I ever taught him." We drank together the taste of reconciliation, both bitter and sweet. Later that evening, as guests were leaving, my father pulled me aside. "I found this in a bookstore last week," he said, handing me a small package. "I thought you might appreciate it." Inside was a book titled "Building Ethical Business Cultures in a Cutthroat World." He had inscribed it to Noel, who showed me what real success looks like. "With respect and love, Dad." It wasn't perfect. Decades of damage cannot be undone in a single year. But it was a start. I have learned that true success is not measured in watches or wealth, or even in revenge served cold. It is found in building something meaningful, in creating opportunities for others, and yes, sometimes in finding the strength to offer grace to those who never thought you would be in a position to give it. Have you ever been underestimated by someone close to you, only to prove them wrong? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. Life has a way of coming full circle, and sometimes the person who undervalues you the most becomes the one who teaches you exactly what kind of person not to become. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more stories of family redemption and unexpected second chances. Share with someone who might need to hear that success is the best response to those who doubt you. Thank you for listening. And remember, sometimes the greatest gift we can give ourselves is letting go of the need for approval from those who cannot see our worth.